The promises that I made as a first-time candidate, I've kept all the way through. My infrastructure promises were to dredge Storm Lake. We got that done thanks to a lot of good local help coming together, and I did my part to the fullest extent that was possible. The second one was 4-lane Highway 20 from Sioux City to Dubuque. And when I get out there, as I did today, and drive on that Highway 20, I'd worked on it for 25 years myself, but I had the privilege of cutting that ribbon October 19th, 2018. And I was so exuberant that I broke the ceremonial scissors. So those two things are high. I laid the foundation legislatively that grew into the renewable fuels industry in Iowa, in both ethanol and biodiesel. That's something that people don't tend to focus on these days. But back in those days, we didn't have a really meaningful ethanol plant in Iowa, and certainly no biodiesel plant. Today, it's an industry that is integrated into the agriculture community. Other things, for example, is that I stood up and said, we've got to secure the border, and we've got to restore the respect for the rule of law. And so on the immigration side of this, we've elected a president that will have about 500 miles of wall that will be built by the end of his term. We don't know how things are going to look in the next term. But also in 18 years in Congress, facing amnesty efforts from Republicans and Democrats, and that includes presidents, not one amnesty bill has passed the House of Representatives, or Congress for that matter, since I've been there. And so those are some of the things. I led the charge on the repeal of Obamacare. I fought it as hard as anybody did before it passed. It's been a disaster for our country. Much of that is gone now, but my legislation has passed to repeal Obamacare multiple times. I can't even tell you how many. And then one of the other pieces was the agriculture side of this. I've introduced legislation that will one day pass that says this, that we can't be allowing California to dictate production of agriculture products in other states. That violates the Commerce Clause. And so that legislation will move forward, I think. And with the opposition to Obamacare and the individual mandate being pulled out of there, all of that was in my original legislation to repeal Obamacare. That's some of the things that come to mind. And then to cap this off, you'll see my lapel here, this heart, and this is about the heartbeat legislation. And the legislation that I drafted and introduced in Congress, the Heartbeat Protection Act, protects babies that have a beating heart. And so that would protect some 95% of the babies that are conceived in this country. And I believe that all human life is sacred in all of its forms, and life begins at the moment of conception. And I carried that bill to 174 co-sponsors. We had the votes in committee to get it passed. We had the votes on the floor to get it passed. And actually my own Republican leadership, they blocked the bill. But I'm proud of what we accomplished, and it lays the foundation to pick this up and move it on. So for the full spectrum constitutional Christian conservatism, if there was a fight there to be fought, I ran to the sound of the guns.
As you leave office, what do you want Iowans to know most about Steve King?
Well, I've written a book that has a lot of that in it, and the title of it is Walking Through the Fire. But I think in the center of it, I'd want them to know is that I've never let Iowans down. Regardless of what's been said by the press, regardless of the things that you think are fact, we've had several scholars drill down into the original sources of every one of those attacks and find out that every one is factual, it's objective, and it's at least a thought process that any conservative could be proud to have. And so I lay that out in the book and make that clear to people. But when I stood up in the beginning and I said that I am a full spectrum constitutional Christian conservative, then on that full spectrum, I've gone into the middle of that fight. And if any promise that I've made, we didn't get them all kept from the standpoint of you can't make Congress do what they don't want to do. But I've never flipped on a position, and also I've never done a quid pro quo. I never cut a deal with anyone that said, I'll vote for your bad bill if you'll vote for my good bill. None of that. So everything has been straight up, and I've dealt with people honestly. And furthermore, in spite of all of the attacks that have flowed forth, especially in the last 4 years or so, Look across here, 750,000 people in this congressional district, 3 million plus Iowans, dealing with tens of thousands of people around the world. And I still don't have a single accuser of anyone who has stepped forward and said they've ever been treated in a disrespectful or disparaging way. They are always treated with respect. And then I want people to remember too, and this city will know, the effort to save the lives of the Tanzanian miracle kids. And I can't say enough for Dr. Steve Meyer. He was a linchpin, but because of my friendship with Dr. Steve Meyer, I was in a place where I had a chance to forge one link in that chain of miracles that saved the lives of the Tanzanian miracle kids, and arrange things to be on the tarmac at Kilimanjaro Airport on August 18th, 2017, when we returned the 3 miracle kids to their home turf, and to hear the cheers of the Tanzanians, when especially Doreen, who had been paralyzed from the waist down, walked down those steps of that DCA, of the Samaritan's Purse, and stepped on that tarmac. When that roar went up, that's a highlight that can never be diminished by all of the things that happened over the last 18 years. That's the memory I want to that I want to cherish the longest.